Well, so I'm asking the question, why am I doing my dissertation on psychoanalysis and African belief system? So the answer is a little complicated. I started at CIS, CIS, California Institute of Integral Studies. So the word integral was very appealing. And I went to this EWP department. It was psychology because I read that little blurb there, what they teach. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So I started studying, and I just realized that I wasn't seeing anything that addressed who I am. So I was being introduced to, I'm okay with learning new stuff, like Indian literature, Eastern literature, and Western literature. But I was a little frustrated, like if it's an integral study or institution, and if East-West is integral, as they claim to be, why isn't it anything that actually really talks about African cosmology or African cosmogony? So, and then I was like, well, that says a lot about what people think about Africa. So I decided to reflect on that and write a dissertation about it. The other reason is that psychoanalysis and African healing systems in general have a lot in common, and also a lot in difference, opposition. So when I start now, I'm just going to define very quickly what psychoanalysis is. But before I define it, I also want to address why I chose psychoanalysis as opposed to any other psychotherapeutical model that is out there, like cognitive behavioral therapy or motivational interviewing, and there's so many out there. Why did I choose psychoanalysis? Well, because there's a lot about psychoanalysis that is so common with the way Africans deal with mental health as in general. Psychoanalysis basically is uses an interpretive phenomenology. So that is what African systems use. So that was very interesting for me. So briefly, Craig Chalkis did a very good job in 2001 writing a lexicon or an encyclopedia regrouping a very key psychoanalytical concept. So if you go there online, Craig Chalkis 2001 encyclopedia, you see those concepts defined. So this basically is his definition. Psychoanalysis as a set of theories and therapies that have evolved from Freud's work with his clients. So, and he talks about those, there are more than 22 theoretical orientations, psychoanalytical theoretical orientations. So I'm not going to talk about all of them. But those are four. I have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but 4 of them are actually very close to the African system. So, but for a more specific definition of what psychoanalysis is, I would rather say that it's a system of psychological theory and therapy that aims to treat mental disorders by investigating the interaction of conscious and unconscious elements in the mind and bringing repressed fears and conflicts into the conscious mind with techniques such as dream interpretation and free association. So I already said why first why I chose psychoanalysis. The second reason why I chose psychoanalysis is because Freud's work was really very, very important for the development of psychology in general. I know Freud is taking a lot of beatings, and a lot of people are, why is talking Freud and all that? My answer is like, well, Freud is actually the one who gave a direction to modern psychology. Yeah, I know it was in the late 29th century, early 20th century, but if you really want to understand the present and the future, you kind of have to have an idea of what happened in the past. So I don't know why people always like say, now Freud, we don't even want to hear about him anymore. That's one thing. Second thing is, if you talk about psychoanalysis and you don't mention Freud, so you better not even talk about psychoanalysis because he's the one who developed that system. So that is one thing. And the second thing is psychoanalytical ideas are embedded in Western culture. So if you look at fields like childcare, childcare, education, literary criticism, cultural studies, mental health, particularly psychotherapy, all over the West, psychoanalytical ideas are there. So, and even here today in the 21st century. So it's very important. But psychoanalysis is really not enjoying those days. Psychoanalysis is taking a beating in the West because the West is pushing for more and more evidence-based therapies. It has to be clear, it has to be very objective, it has to be positivistic, it has to follow a very clear and objective steps so that everyone can see what you did. So the psychoanalysis that uses integrative phenomenology doesn't really have that, even though they claim that they are a positivist system. But that is not what is being said out there. So people are like, no, in psychotherapy today, when you say you're a psychodynamic therapist, they say, forget about this. Now it's about cognitive psychology. All is about cognition. Well, interesting. So about 2009, for example, said that psychoanalytic techniques are yet to demonstrate their validity. It's not valid anymore. So, and Tori is actually somebody who gives a definition that's very interesting. He said, well, if we consider psychoanalysis as an interpretive phenomenology, then we're good. Because then you go in the mind and guess things, and then the patient will talk, and then you interpret what the patient says, and reading minds and all that, we're not there anymore. So, and because of that, then psychoanalysis is no more than what native indigenous theories are. So that is the connection. So the African healing systems are also accused to be very opaque. It's not clear. So you have to read minds, you have to have that healer that's going to talk to spirit and all that. It's like, no, that's something we don't understand. So that's where psychoanalysis and African system kind of meet. So, and furthermore, how then do I even really relate psychoanalysis to African belief systems? Like I said, they both accused of witch doctrine. Yeah, psychoanalysis, you basically have to be somebody who read the mind, you know, to divine things. So you have to be a witch doctor. You know, everyone knows what a witch doctor is. Well, I saw a picture of Obama with a bone through a nose and something. And yeah, they also use talk therapy. So that is a stronghold of psychoanalysis. It's about talking. The therapist is sitting there, you go there, and then you tell the therapist how you feel, what happened, all the problems, all that, it just takes, and then it will interpret it for you and say, oh, I guess maybe this is the problem. And oh yeah, and then you heal. So African system basically use that first part. Like you have to really tell the healer how you feel and all that, then the healer will talk with the family, talk with the community, talk with the ancestors, and then what psychoanalysis doesn't do, African system will do, they will not actually do something to help you. They will go in the forest, get some herbs or get some plants or put you in a pot and cook you up or whatever they will do, and it works. So yeah, it might be witch doctrine, but it works, so that's fine. So the other level is that they both use regressive methods. So, and we'll quickly see what regressive method means. When you go, like I said, in psychoanalysis, the patient will verbalize thoughts, and then those thoughts will be through free association, like you just flow connecting one idea to the next so that we can get to the bottom of the problem. And also fantasy, like, well, you know, sometimes you can have some ideas that we don't know what is the reality, if it's fiction, whatever, but there's some truth there. So, or dreams. So Freud was big on dreams. The interpretation of dreams, I'm sure a lot of people read it, it's really big. So, and also in psychoanalysis, the analyst then will analyze, when you listen to you talk, will analyze what he or she believes to be the unconscious conflicts that is creating your situation. and then will interpret that for you so that you're like, oh yeah, I didn't know about that, and then you heal, and then you make a lot of money. So African healing practice is basically the same, like the patient will verbalize thoughts through the same system, the same process, but we use more of legends and folklore and folk tale. And then the healer will now identify the cause of the illness. Because the cause of the illness is very well defined within the African system. Like you have to break something, you have to break a community dance, or anger a spirit, or anger the family, or anything that will contribute to your problem. So that is a belief. And then the healer will now offer cleansing, initiation rituals for recovery, like I said earlier, cook you in a pot or do whatever, you know, and then you will be fine because they will bring you back into the community. You're sick because you broke something in the community. So some quick points of comparison. So we have in psychoanalysis events in early childhood. That is very important because psychoanalysis, the premise of psychoanalysis is that you suffer today because there is an unresolved issue when you were growing up as a child. So the therapist has to, through free association, lead you back to that childhood moment and help you confront what happened there so that you can resolve that and then come back to your adult life and be well. So that is a process there. Well, the African system is, well, you're sick because something is wrong between you and the family. You're sick because something is wrong between you and your community. And something is wrong because of you and your ancestor. So we need to find that. So, and I say ancestor because it's now you go to the regressive method to go back to the ancestors. So the psychoanalysis also say, well, your problem is because you have some irrational drives, you know, that come there that push you to do something, and then because you have a super ego there, like the society say you cannot do that, then you repress that, and then you have that conflict, and then you're, oh no, I'm just dead. So, but the African system says, no, it's, well, we understand that there are physical and spiritual entities that are part of your life that might affect the way you behave or your problems. So, and then in the psychoanalysis system, then you develop defense mechanism not to, you know, like, well, I'm not sure about this, and then you begin to be maybe not proactive but reactive because you don't want to deal with this or whatever. So in psychoanalysis, we also have conflicts between conscious and unconscious mind that lead to mental illness. I already said that. And then we have, the therapist will bring unconscious material into consciousness. I don't want to repeat myself, I said that. The African system is that the connection between the two worlds, because we don't have a difference between the physical world and the spiritual world. It's the same thing. Like I'm here, I'm in sync with whatever is happening back home. Like I'm seen alone, but in my head I'm not alone. There's no decision that I can make that will not be influenced by the whole belief system that I carry with me. So, and that is important. So I'm really connected to home on a level that I cannot explain in Western language. So there's some minor differences. Well, we have, for example, in the West, not necessarily psychoanalysis, the concept of self. In the West is individualistic, everybody knows that, or people know that. In African system is non-individualistic because the person has no existence outside of the community or the family. You don't exist. So the culture is heterogeneous in the West because you now have the migrants and everything, and then it's cosmopolitan. But I know people with what? African culture is homogeneously based. The asterisk there because it's something that I need to talk about when I come later on that. Because they'll say, no, it's not true. Okay. So youth is defined by social norms in the West, and in African, yeah. And then family is nuclear in the West. My family in the West is you, me, my wife and I, and no children. In Africa, it's not my wife and I, my children. It's my family. Like if you're married and then the family doesn't approve your wife, she's not there. You can't be with her. Or her family doesn't approve you, you can't be together. So it's what the community and the family think that lead to your decision making. So it's non-nuclear. So what is then African belief system? So it's a set of beliefs that help define African worldview. So these are quick examples that I really don't want to go because I have like a million examples, but just to give an idea, for example, the individual is intrinsically linked to his or her community. I already talked about that, like no existence outside of the community. Death is an extension of life cycle of Mother Nature. Like in the West, dying is, people fear dying in the West. Like death is feared here. But in African system, death is just a transition to a new realm where you go back and connect with your ancestors who are actually not dead, who are alive, but just in a different way. So you just go meet them. So also illness is caused by physical and spiritual entities in the African belief system. And the natural order of things, if you disrupt, things have to be in a certain way. If you disrupt things, then that creates chaos in the African system. So, I don't want to go into some example that will, anyway. So why did I choose the African belief system? I come from the premise that our beliefs determine how we behave. And then I'm really, really kind of like interested to not see emphasis in psychological studies on belief systems. Because people are ready to die for what they believe. So, and the way when Africa surrendered to the European who came to colonize, it was through the belief system. When they came with the military, really, we had people who really used the forest to fight the weapons. When they came as merchants, sending things and doing the slavery thing, we had some Africans to cooperate with other Africans and sell other Africans into America. But when they came with faith, then we had no way to fight, because African mindset is religious. We have a cosmogony that is based on believing. So, and when they bring the God, the white Jesus, they say, what you're doing is witchcraft, get rid of it, this is the real God, and then embrace it. And we were like, wow, I don't know what they did, but they were very convincing. And then that's how they got African. And then we were like, oh, let's go to the white God. And then somebody, a hybrid like me, I don't even know who I am anymore. So, so it's very important, belief system. And then belief system in African context is what unifies Africans. From a different mindset, it will be like, what? No, you guys are too different. But from an African perspective, an African relate to another African like there is no boundaries or nothing. I'll get to that if I have more time in detail. So this is the critique of Africa. Well, Africa is very complex. There are multitudes of tribes and cultures. There's no single therapeutic model that can really help. So, and what I really want to talk a little bit about is the idea or the concept of Africa. It's manufactured. It's made up. What is Africa? What does African even mean? So, the idea of Africa is a complex one with multiple genealogies and meanings, so that explorations of African culture, identity or nationality, in singular or in plural, any explorations of what makes Africa African are often quite slippery, as these notions tend to swing unsteadily between the poles of essentialism and contingency, describing and defining Africa and all tropes prefixed by its problematic commandments entails engaging discourse about Africa. The paradigms and politics through which the idea of Africa has been constructed or consumed and sometimes celebrated and condemned. So as we can see, African identities are vast and very complex. Nonetheless, there are 4 categories that help capture the concept of Africa. We have Africa as a biology. Africa as a biology is, for example, skin color. For example, well, when a Westerner or any other person outside of the African continent talks about Africa, oh, it's African, the south of Sahara. African, sub-Saharan African. Because we have, oh, now we have the white in the north, so we need to, so there is that biological African that needs to be addressed. There is that Africa as an image. So, when I talk about biological Africa, it's the racial Africa. Africa as an image is the representational Africa. Outside of the continent, be it on the West or in the East, when we talk about Africa, it's an image. It can be fiction or it can be reality. It's just that place, that other place, where that thing, so it's kind of like put in the box. The thing is, how is that perceived by Africans? That has not been addressed. Africa as a space, geographical space, or Africa as a memory. Africa has a history. So, and that alone can explain a lot of things. That I will address later. But then, when I try to put Africa in a context where we have those common characteristics that unify them, so that is essential, strategic essentialism. So let us talk a little bit about strategic essentialism. So this is what Doris said. Strategic essentialism is the ways in which subordinate or marginalized social groups may temporarily put aside local differences in order to forge a sense of collective identity through which they band together in political movements. Other people have defined Africa for Africans. It's time for Africans to sit and see what is the commonality that will push for a new order where Africans can actually address their own problems without people addressing it for them or defining it for them. So yes, it is strategic essentialism. I need that. It is a practical decision. I need a strategic essentialism because the world is being globalized now. The West is really pervasive. And in Africa now, I have a friend in the room who told me that in China, for example, you see a doctor in China who prefer modern medicine placated on the Western world than the Chinese medicine. When I was in Cameroon, I was sick, I would go to the African healers or the Chinese hospital because I love the herbs and all the things that they did. But I'm surprised that with the globalization of identities, that some people are losing who they are, losing their identity because this is the way to do things. So, well, I need strategic essentialism to look at my core, to look at my essence. Because it's a self-imposed identity. Africans impose on themselves an identity that unifies them so that they can address their issues. As opposed to an inflicted identity, which has been pre-designed and predefined by Western models to just be imposed and say, you fit in this category. So, no, we inflict that and we accept that because we push an agenda. Has to be clear. Then the problem or the question would be, well, who defines the parameter of that model from the African perspective? Well, Africans, whether scholar or none, have to come together to design that. So, that model has also another issue. Saying that we have common characteristics that unify us means that essence is prior to existence, and do not tell that to a Western person. Because for a Western person, existence precedes essence. We have no existence before, there's nothing before we exist, there's nothing after we exist. And our minds and our meanings are defined by our existence. But the African concept is, we already have an essence that is not contingent, but that is dependent upon being seen. So there is already life, but we're just not seeing it. But that life that already exists in essence depends on us seeing it. So therefore, essence precedes existence. And then we're okay, if we agree with that. So we have a few methodological differences. We have the West, psychoanalysis says that it's positivist now. So the West is pushing for a very evidence-based methods, positivistic. And then these are the middle. Ask a question, do background research, construct a hypothesis, test your hypothesis by doing experiment, analyze data, and draw conclusions, and communicate results. Well, strategic essentialism, well, you have a group of marginalized people who have common issues, common problems. Go there, see that group, then find what are the common problems. What binds those problems together? Like, what is so essential for them, for their survival, for their identity? You find that. And then you research the cause of the problems, and then you analyze possible solution and you communicate result. So what do we have? We have scientific positivism aims for universal truths. Strategic essentialism aims for universal truths. They use the same models. What happened with scientific positivism is you have a sample. You want to study 1 billion people. You take 1,000 or 1 million. You run your experiment on them. The conclusion, you apply that to 1 billion people. There is something wrong there. You just say it's scientific because we tested it, so it can be just generalized. And then my question is, well, if that is the case, how do you explain a study that has been done on schizophrenia on a person in San Francisco? How do you actually explain that the result here can be applicable to somebody like me, born and raised in Cameroon, who was no reality with San Francisco before I came here? But some study we're doing somewhere there and you just say, you gotta just take it. But then when I complain like that, you say, well, keep our model because it's objective, adapt it to your case. Interesting. So you give me your model that you design based on your problem. You say that will work with me as long as I just adapt it. Anyway, so strategic essentialism, you group those people in problems, you generalize to the people that concern. In the end, we have same systems. So why are they blaming Africans for not being objective or positivist? No, it doesn't make sense. Because we know who has the power, who decided what is the right way to do things and what is not the right way to do things. So, and that is interesting because that's going to be like the focal point of my dissertation. I'm going to be navigating between, positivism and strategic essentialism, and then I will look at how I can create an emic internal and emic external way of applying psychotherapy in Africa. Meaning, as a hybrid who went to Western school, and as a traditional African who knows what is happening, I need to basically combine myself into a model that can be helpful. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Peter?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
sorry, I didn't put it in. But I feel kind of Western positivism has a little bit of a bad rap because, they don't just, took the case of San Francisco and schizophrenia, but it's a question of work, and Western positivists will go to Africa and say, will our theory work in Africa also? But it's just a question of work, and they do lots of research. They do lots of research in India on different population groups to see if it's applicable generally. So I think the largest part of it is just a question.
My question was, who does the research?
Well, PhD students.
Who?
In other universities.
Where did they come from? They come from?
Recently, I met a guy who's doing studies on the gay population in India, even though he's from San Francisco, and I asked him, well, why are you doing that? Precisely because they want to see if their theories from America are applicable to places like India, which he's not native of.
Yeah, I do not disagree with that. That is the ethic part of my research.
Right.
I'm okay with the ethic part. Like, I love an external view. I love the positive position. So if an ethic view comes to my research, I'm like, yes, how do I look at it from your perspective? I also need an emic position. I need a native, somebody who can also talk from that angle. I cannot just say, oh, you're a scholar, you come from San Francisco, you know it all. Right. That is the question, that's the problem. Yeah. So you
yes. African belief system is centered more on community and group rather than individual. I'd like to know what is the model of self-actualization of African belief system?
Yeah, the model of that is living in harmony with your family and community. You self-actualize.
So individual success is not important.
It is important, but it's to a lesser level. If it's so the family and the community is not happy, no matter how happy you are, yeah, that's you. So you don't have an existence outside the community. So your single happiness is not really a happiness. Your happiness must make sure that it makes other people happy. Then that becomes validated. That's why African system, when one succeeds, it has to become the success of the whole. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't really know what scientific positivism is. Could you define that?
Scientific positivism is that approach that says that the scientific knowledge is that which is studied through data received through our senses.
Oh.
We have to feel, smell, touch, count, and then, only then, can we say it is knowledge.
I see.
So that's scientific positivism. Yeah.
So you talked about the sample, I think you said, and generalization for scientific positivism, and then you talked about grouping and generalization for the yes. And what I'm curious about is the grouping and generalization. Would the generalizations be simply made for that group?
Yeah, for the people
just
concerned.
within that
Yeah.
group concerned.
Yeah.
So then it is much more based on, to me that wasn't as much of a comparison or a parallel between the sample or the scientific positivism, because you're trying to take 1,000 people to represent 1 billion, whereas with the grouping you're looking at studies within that group,
Yeah.
right? And then what's going to work for that group.
Yeah. So this is the difference. The sampling plus generalization aims for ideology.
Right.
It is an ideological power.
Right.
Like, we have the power because we can do this and we can generalize it. So, and therefore this is the way to do it. But the grouping and generalization is issue or agenda based. Like, there is a group of people who just struggle to find their identity,
Yeah.
struggle to solve their problems,
Right.
but then they just can't because they're not using a model that will be validated. So they're designing a model that will be applicable for that that population
Right.
concerned. So it's in a way, it's a generalization based on the agenda and the strategy, as opposed to the ideology. No more, thanks.